"She's only a nurse," said the surgeon, his voice carrying a dismissive sharpness that cut through the tense atmosphere of the makeshift field hospital. His gloved hands hovered above the operating table, ready to open the chest of the man writhing in pain. Around him, the team of medics scrambled, their boots clattering against the metal floor, their faces tight with urgency. The patient was no ordinary soldier. He was a Navy SEAL, dragged in just 20 minutes earlier, riddled with shrapnel from a mine that had detonated on the outskirts of the village. His pulse was weak, his blood pressure dropping. Every second ticked closer to death. And standing quietly at the foot of the table was the nurse Elena Carter. Her brown hair was tied in a hasty bun, a few loose strands clinging to her sweat-sheened temples. Her eyes, however, burned with a steady calm that the chaos around her failed to disturb. She had been the one who kept pressure on the SEAL's chest wound, barking orders to clear a path through the triage tent. She had knelt in the dirt, blood soaking her uniform, refusing to let him go. Now, inside the surgical bay, the surgeon's words hung in the air like smoke. "She's only a nurse," he repeated, glaring at Elena as if her very presence was an inconvenience. "Step back, and let the professionals handle this." Elena's lips parted, but she said nothing at first. She looked down at the SEAL, at the man who had locked eyes with her even while unconscious, as if his body recognized the one steady anchor in the sea of pain. Her hand was still pressed over his wound, her palm hot with his blood. She could feel each weakening beat of his heart through her fingers. Then the SEAL stirred, his lips trembled, and his voice ragged. Barely a whisper escaped. "Don't broken bar, let me broken bar go." Everyone froze. The surgeon leaned closer, trying to make sense of the words, but the SEAL's bloodshot eyes shifted weakly toward Elena. He wasn't speaking to the surgeon. He wasn't pleading with the doctors or the techs. He was clinging to her. Elena bent low, her ear almost to his lips. He mumbled something else, faint, but the words made her spine stiffen. "Tell Thema broken bar who you are." The surgeon rolled his eyes. "He's delirious. Open the thoracic cavity." "No," Elena said suddenly, her voice ringing sharp across the room. The team paused, startled. The surgeon spun toward her. "Excuse me? You can't cut him open yet," she said, standing tall, her hand still on the wound. "His left lung is collapsing, but if you cut through the rib cage right now, you'll crush what little function it has left. You'll kill him on the table." The surgeon's nostrils flared. "And what would you suggest, nurse? A miracle? You're here to hand me tools and mop sweat, not give orders." But Elena didn't flinch. She turned to the anesthesiologist. "Needle decompression a second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Now, his chest cavity is filling too fast. We stabilize before we cut." The anesthesiologist hesitated, his gaze flickering between surgeon and nurse. For a moment, the tent seemed to hold its breath. Then the SEAL gasped, his body arching as oxygen slipped further from him. "Do it," Elena snapped, with trembling hands. The anesthesiologist obeyed, sliding the needle home. A hiss escaped as trapped air vented. Instantly, the SEAL's breathing eased, ragged but stronger. His oxygen levels ticked upward on the monitor. The room filled with stunned silence. The surgeon stared, his pride bruised, his authority cracked. "How did you?" But Elena wasn't looking at him. She finally lifted her bloody hand from the wound, replacing it with a sterile dressing a medic had been holding. "Now you can open him," she said evenly. "He'll survive the cut." The surgeon, jaw tight, gave a curt nod to his team. "Scalpel." As they began the procedure, the SEAL's gaze remained locked on Elena. His lips moved again, quieter this time, and she leaned close. "Tell them," he rasped. She shook her head faintly, brushing a strand of hair back. "Focus on breathing, that's all you need to do." But the secret was already stirring. The surgery lasted an hour, and Elena never left the SEAL's side. She monitored his vitals, corrected a dosage when she noticed a miscalculation, and caught a vein collapse before anyone else did. The surgeon, though silent, kept glancing at her with something between irritation and reluctant respect. When the final stitch was tied and the SEAL stabilized, the tension in the room broke. Medics wheeled him out toward recovery. Elena followed, but the surgeon's voice stopped her. "Carter." She turned slowly. The surgeon peeled off his gloves with a snap. "Where did you learn that?" "The decompression, the blood loss management." "That's not nurse-level training." Her jaw tightened. For a moment, It looked like she wouldn't answer, but before she could speak, a voice from the recovery room carried back, "She's not just a nurse," the SEAL croaked hoarsely, his voice stronger now with oxygen flowing into him. "She saved more lives than half the surgeons I've ever met." Everyone turned. The SEAL, pale but alive, stared directly at the surgeon. His hand gripped the blanket as if steadying himself for something he had long wanted to say. "She was one of us." The words rippled like a shockwave through the tent. Elena closed her eyes briefly, as if wishing he hadn't said it. But the truth was out now, rolling through whispers among the medics. The surgeon frowned. "One of you? What are you talking about?" The SEAL coughed weakly, then forced the words out. "Before she put on scrubs a broken bar she wore the trident. Navy SEAL, operator, mission medic. She saved my team in Fallujah, dragged 3 men out under fire when we were ambushed. That's who she is." The surgeon's mouth fell open, the instruments in his hand clattering against the tray. Gasps erupted around the room. Eyes widened, heads turned. Disbelief hung heavy because a woman in their midst, dismissed as just a nurse, had once carried the weight of a trident and fought alongside the most elite warriors in the world. Elena stood still, her posture straight, her face unreadable. But inside, her heart pounded. She had buried the past, choosing the quiet duty of nursing over the violent echoes of combat. She hadn't wanted the glory, the medals, the recognition, only the chance to heal instead of harm. The SEAL's gaze softened. "I owed you my life once, Carter. Looks like I owe you again." The room was silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. Then, slowly, respect replaced disbelief in the surgeon's eyes. His voice, though quieter, carried a note of humility. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, almost to himself, "you should have told us." Elena shook her head. You needed a nurse, not a SEAL." But the SEAL, smiling faintly despite his pain, whispered the final truth. "Sometime as a broken bar you need both." Word spread quickly through the base. By evening, stories circulated of the nurse who had once been a warrior, the woman who had saved countless lives long before she wore scrubs. Soldiers nodded to her in passing with newfound respect. Medics sought her advice, no longer out of obligation, but out of trust. The surgeon, humbled, avoided her for days before finally approaching with an awkward but genuine thank you. And though Elena accepted it with quiet grace, she knew the real validation had already come from the man who had lived to tell the truth. For him, she was not only a nurse. She was the reason he breathed, the reason hope still flickered in his chest. She was proof that sometimes the strongest healers are forged in fire, and that titles mean little when life hangs by a thread. And in that field hospital, amid the scent of antiseptic and the echoes of war, Elena Carter's past no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a bridge between who she had been and who she had become. Because once a warrior, always a warrior. And for the wounded who woke to her steady hands and unshakable presence, there was never any doubt. She was more than a nurse. She was their lifeline,